Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. We currently have a fusion event going on that is unlike any other fusion event that has ever happened in Raid Shadow Legends. So we're going to talk about our fusion plan for Timit the Fool, but we're also going to talk about some of the unique things that are going on with this fusion and how some of those things may affect your plan here, whether you choose to go for this fusion or not. We're going to try to do this relatively quickly, so let's get going. Just a quick reminder, I live stream every Tuesday and Saturday. On Tuesdays, I give away free takeovers. That stream starts at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And on Saturdays, my editor, Son, and I take out our noob versus pro accounts and have some fun hanging out with people and getting into trouble there. So come join us Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. Okay, so Timit the Fool is live. You can see he is a fragment champion. So it's going to be not a classic fusion, but a fragment fusion event. But there's a lot going on with this particular event because we still currently have the Halloween Titan event going on. And this is going to overlap with the fusion. In fact, this fusion has been folded into these overall events. So I'm going to show you some of the ways that's going to affect how you might perceive the difficulty of going after Timit the Fool. So here on the tournament page, you can see we have a spider tournament for Timit, but you'll also notice the Halloween Titan event banner. So you can earn Halloween points, but this is also a fusion tournament. So if we go into the tournament here, you're going to see that the rewards include fragments for Timit, but in addition, there are also Halloween points available. So here we have Timit fragments at 2250, and then up at 3300, we have 50 Halloween fragments. Now, if you are going for the full completion of the Halloween Titan event, or you are going at least for that 4-star Wukong Soul, you may be going after these points for the Halloween event anyway, which means these fragments for Timit the Fool are sort of unavoidable. You're going to go all the way up, and that means you're going to get some of these fragments anyway. If we look at the events page, we can see that the Dungeon Divers event is the same way. Again, the Timit fragments are on the same reward path as the Halloween points. And there are 100 Halloween points out here at 6,500 on this account. Depending on what level your account is, your point totals may actually be different than mine. This is my Lobby account, so these are probably a little bit more friendly than some of the point totals you may be seeing if your account is in the 90s or at 100. But the distribution of the prizes is going to be the same. So we have this Ancient Shard, then we've got Champion Fragments, then a Primal Shard, then Halloween points. And again, we can see that the Summon Rush and Champion Training event that are coming up are likewise Halloween Titan events. So in the comments of my preview video, a lot of people have said that they're not too interested in Timit. He's a solid champion, but not enough to want to go after. But I think that if you are already pursuing the Halloween Titan event and you're going after those Wukong Souls, then it might be relatively easy to pick up Timit. Now, one thing to be aware of is that the fusion event will be going on for the next 13 and a half days or so, and that there are only 5.5 days left of the Halloween Titan event. So it could be that you're just going to pick up some fragments during the rest of this Halloween Titan event. You're going to finish out your Wukong Souls, and then you're going to forget about Timit, and that's fine. But I just wanted to let everybody know that there's an extra double dip going on here. Potentially, you can get a lot of Timit fragments relatively early in this fusion for not a lot of effort. In fact, you may just get it because you're going for the Halloween Titan event. Okay, now let's take a look at the actual fragment event calendar. Now, let me move myself out of the way here, and you will see that there are 130 total fragments available. 20 of those will come from tournament leaderboards. We never plan on those. So if this is your first fusion event that you're going to attempt, that 20 in green only comes into play if you win or maybe place second in a tournament. So you can't expect to get any of those fragments. That means there are 110 total fragments available, and we need 100, so we can skip on 10 total. So as we look at the calendar, we'll notice it is 10 full days. Today is October 26th, so we are already into the first day. And the Spider Tournament is live, and I believe the Dungeon Divers event is also live. Now, if you've never done one of these before, or if you just like planning ahead, the first thing we always want to do is count up our energy. We want to see where we can double dip or triple dip 4-hour energy. And so we're going to do that first here. So we want to remember that for every tournament, we need about 2,000 energy. And this is true pretty much regardless of where you are in your account's progression. It's most efficient typically to farm stage 20 of the dungeons, but the other stages aren't so much less efficient that it's going to drastically change the energy requirement. It may change the time requirement or the number of runs that you have to do. But as long as you're picking a relatively efficient stage, it's going to take you about 2,000 energy. So here for this spider tournament, we're going to take about 2,000 energy. Now for the dragon tournament, we're also going to need about 2,000 energy, another 2,000 for the ice golem. And then over here for the fire knight, we're going to need another 2,000. Now you can't really get away from those. We're going to use those as our baselines. So we know that we're going to need at least 8,000 energy over these 14 days. We're probably going to need a lot more. But we want to look for those double dips. And one of the things that we notice down here is the Dungeon Divers event. We also have a champion training event. Both of these also require energy. Now, a Dungeon Divers event typically takes about 5,000 energy. And a champion training event is highly variable because it depends on how much of the training you do in campaign, how much of the training you can maybe do in some of the tournaments, and then how much of the training you do with brews in the tavern. So let's call this, just for the sake of argument, let's call this about 3,000 energy. And then we have another one down here, champion training tournament. I'm sorry, up here we have another 3,000 energy. Now, the totals can be different. You'll notice that this one looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's over 5 calendar days. Now, this one is also over 5 calendar days, but sometimes the totals can change from the events to the tournaments. So you want to make sure that you have an idea of how many points you actually need when those events and tournaments pop. So now we want to make sure that we're double dipping as effectively as possible so we don't have to use all of this energy, because right now what we're looking at is we're looking at somewhere in the vicinity with this 5K down here of looks like about 20, is that 24? 10, 16, 20, 24,000 energy. But by double dipping and triple dipping, we can actually reduce this quite a bit. So the first thing that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to line up our tournaments with our Dungeon Divers events. So what we would like to do is we'd like to see, okay, this dragon tournament overlaps this Dungeon Divers event from Sunday to Monday, October 29 and October 30. So what we would like to do is get this 2K for this tournament into this window. If we can burn all 2,000 points of energy in the dragon tournament in this 24-hour window or so, then that's going to be 2K that we use right here in the Dungeon Divers. Likewise, we have a spider tournament that lines up with the beginning of the Dungeon Divers. And then we also have a champion training event that lines up with the Dungeon Divers. So if we can get the full 2K of the spider tournament in the first 24 hours, right, then that's going to give us 2K down here. So now we're up to 4,000 of the energy out of the 5,000 energy. And now if we can line up all of our champion training in this window here, then we can cover the Dungeon Divers event completely with the other events. Now, a couple of things about the champion training event is the Dungeon Divers points you'll get for farming campaign. Those are a lot fewer than the points that you're going to get for the spider tournament and the dragon tournament. So it may take you, all 3,000 energy here to get the equivalent of 1,000 energy that you would get in tournaments. Like if you spent that 1,000 energy in tournaments, you would get far more points for the Dungeon Divers event than if you go and do champion training by doing campaign. But that's okay, because we're double dipping here. We're getting extra. Now, there is one last thing to consider, which is if you can do any champion training during the tournaments. So if you can farm, say, Dragon 20 with only 2 or 3 champions, and then you can put food champions in the other spots, you're going to get some value out of this 2,000 energy here. Maybe you'll save yourself 400 or 500 energy overall by doing that. And that would allow you to save yet more energy. So in fact, we can wipe this 5K completely off the board and realize that we can do every event in the first half with about 7,000 energy. Now, the second half is not going to be quite as efficient because the Dungeon Divers event doesn't line up with the Ice Golem tournament at all. And so, unfortunately, we're going to be not throwing away, but we're only going to be single dipping on the Ice Golem 2000 energy, which means the second half is probably going to take somewhere around 9,000 energy. So we're looking at about 16,000 energy instead of the 24,000 energy we were looking at. So we can save about 8,000 energy, maybe even a little more if you can double dip your tournaments with the champion training. So you could potentially get this down to maybe 14 or 15,000 energy for the entire event. And that's a significant savings if you can do those triple dips. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about the silver that you're going to need. Each artifact enhancement event is generally 20 million silver. And there are 3 of them. So there's 20 million here, there's 20 million here, and there's 20 million on the third one. The good news is you don't need all 60 million when you start. You're going to be running a lot of tournaments and you're going to be getting a lot of drops from champion training and all of the dungeons that you're running. So you're going to get a lot of silver over the course of these 2 weeks, but you are going to need about 60 million total silver. What I highly recommend is that you start with about 40% or so. If you could start with somewhere between, call it 20 million and 30 million, that's really the range you want to be in. It does depend where you are in your account's progression and what stages of the tournaments you're farming. So if you're a little bit earlier in the game, you may need a little bit more money. And that means you may want to start with a slightly larger percentage of the total before the event actually starts. Now, the event has started. So if you haven't saved up at least, say, 15 million, it's going to be very difficult if you are not at least at stage 20 and you have some gems and maybe just a lot of saved up energy to overshoot some of these totals. If you haven't done a gear cleanse in a long time, or you have a ton of forge materials you haven't used up, those can be sources of relatively quick silver that you don't have to account for. Like, you can add to your total that you haven't already saved. So you might be able to get 2, 3, 5 million silver out of a gear cleanse and some forge cleansing, and that can help you with the silver requirements. Now, finally, let's talk about the hardest events here, which are going to be the Summon Rush and the Champion Chase Tournament. Now, the Summon Rush typically takes 4 to 6 Sacred Shards, and that's typically the best way to go after these is with Sacred Shards. There is no 2-time event for summoning this weekend. Now, there is something really interesting that's going on that I don't think has happened before, and that is the Prism Shard event is currently active and will be active when the Summon Rush goes live. Now, typically, the Summon Rush yields points for the shards that you pull. It doesn't matter what champion you get, it just matters that you pulled shards. I've never seen Prism Shards added to the schedule of rewards. So it may be that the Prism Shards don't give you anything during this Summon Rush. It would be better if it were a champion chase, right? Because then at least getting the champions would reward you with those points. But unfortunately, it feels like for the Summon Rush, we may not get any points for our Prism Shards. Now, I'm still going to hold my Prism Shards until tomorrow. I have 3 pulls on each of my accounts. And so I'm just going to wait. It's about 16 hours or so, and I'm going to see if they've been friendly and added the Prism Shards to the Summon Rush. That might make it a little bit easier if they have. Now, as far as the Champion Chase is concerned, the Champion Chase rewards points based on the champions that you pull. So you will get points for champions you farm in campaign. You will get points from rares that you get from mystery shards, like more points there, obviously, than uncommons or commons. You'll get points for fragment champions or fusion champions that you create. So if you have a fusion in the portal that you're close to completing, you may want to hold it for the Champion Chase tournament. And that's going to alleviate the number of shards that you typically need for that event. If you are doing that event, I usually recommend that you do that event with ancient shards. And usually it's in the vicinity of about 50 to 80 ancient shards. The problem with that is actually during that weekend, there is a 2x Sacred Shard event. So you're probably going to be pulling Sacred Shards during the Champion Chase tournament. So if you only have a few Sacreds, you might want to pull the minimum number of shards that you can get away with during this summon rush. Maybe even use some of your ancients here on the summon rush. Those aren't great points, but that would allow you to save your sacreds for the champion chase tournament. And the point requirements over there and the flexibility with all of the different sources of champions might allow you to get more value out of pulling your sacreds over there and just make the champion chase a little bit easier this time around. Now, remember, you can skip out on 10 points. So one of the things you could do is just get the 5 points for the summon rush. The 15 is going to be broken into 2 rewards. There's going to be one for 5 points and a higher one for 10 points. So depending on how you feel and how many shards you have, you could just pull for the first 5 points and leave the 10 points on the board and then go after the full 15 on the champion chase. Or if you have a ton of shards and want to go for the summon rush and the champion chase, you can go there and then save your 10 fragments somewhere else. Maybe skip an artifact enhancement event, save yourself 20 million silver, or maybe skip a dungeon divers and again, save yourself a bunch of energy there. One last thing to note is that there are super raids that are going to be available for the duration of the fusion event. Hopefully they will line up with the tournaments. It looks like they should. And so you're going to have the Spider's Den, which is currently ongoing for the Spiders tournament. We have the Dragons tournament next. The Ice Golems tournament is the 3rd tournament. So these are in the correct order, and hopefully they will overlap with those tournaments. And that should save you some time during this fusion event. Okay, so there he is. That is the reward, Timit the Fool. He's in the Bannerlords faction. We can see his stats now. His stats are pretty solid. 22,500 HP, 1,200 defense, 99 speed, even some resistance and accuracy in his kit. So it feels like this guy's going to be decent. He's going to be solid. I think he's a really good progression champion. He may have some uses at endgame, but he's definitely not a world breaker or a game changer. I will probably be going after him on my main account, but not on my Lobby account. I'm going to wait for a better fusion for that account. Okay, that is it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or any thoughts about Timit the Fool in the comments of this video. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. I've been Colred. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you in another video soon.